שיעור אחד הרב קנאי.
בוקר טוב, everybody. So very nice. I believe we met 2 weeks ago or something like that, and we started a topic. You see the title, the obligation of Torah learners in Army service. Well, you know, yesterday night, yesterday night, the Lithuanian leader, Rabbi Avraham Kannai, that's what I heard in the radio when I was driving from Ramot here, and I also heard it last night, that he directed the Yeshiva Boys to ignore every how do you spell it? Savushon?
Summons.
Yeah.
Summons to the army.
Summons. Anything that they're getting from the army, they shouldn't come to the office. They shouldn't come to the offices. They shouldn't come to any place. They need to ignore everything. So that's the last update regarding our topic in terms of what's going on politically. We will return to deal with the issue. הילה? יש כל מיני אנשים שאין להם דפים, yeah, so we're going to return to focus on the sources and see what we can find from them. I just want to mamash dedicate the first minutes to review orally the main points that we've seen last time, so we could start right away to the next step. We covered several things 2 weeks ago. I made an introductory remark that is important to remind today, that I'm dealing here with a certain aspect of the matter of what we call Haredim participating in the army. The topic of Haredim participating in the army is a much broader topic. It has social effects, it has mentality effects, it has all kinds of things that I'm not dealing with here. Here I'm just dealing with the narrow halachic question whether with the claim that someone who is dedicating his life for Torah learning is exempt from serving in the army, and that claim, this is the topic that I'm dealing with. The topic of Haredim in the army is much broader and has other aspects too that I'm not dealing with in this class. That's point one. Point two, I made the starting point that is actually the ending point, I have to say, that's the spoiler, but that simply put, since we look at the Rambam in Hilchot Melachim, laws of wars and kingdom, and we look in the Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah, where he lists all the benefits of Torah learners, and we see that this is not mentioned there, okay, and it's not mentioned also in the laws of wars. So in the two places that, are there any? Okay. All right. There are no more source sheets. They ran out of them. What? So I'm sorry. Okay. Let's continue. So I repeat again. Since we look at the Rambam in the places where such a law, if it was true, the Torah learners are exempt from participating in a Melchemet Mitzvah, it should have been listed either in Hilchot Melachim Umilchamotehem or in Hilchos Talmud Torah. It's not mentioned there. It's not mentioned anywhere in Shas. It's not mentioned at all. So, simply put, that is already in itself shows that the starting point is that they're chayev. The only thing that now we will examine in this class is some sources that are brought as if they prove that the Torah learners are exempt, and we will see that these claims don't hold water. Another thing that I mentioned is that my Rebbe Rav Lichtenstein, in his comprehensive article about the matter, said that the reason for the fact that yeshiva bochers are chayev in participating in the army is not only because of the formal law of milchemet mitzvah, that is true, but it's also because always a Ben Torah has to balance between Torah, avoda, and gmilut chasadim. And when your brothers are defending the country and putting even your life at risk in order to defend the country is the highest level of chesed, and it's inconceivable that a Torah image, personality, will be totally out of this. Third point that I wanted to mention is that I mentioned there is an article, a Lamdish article of Rav Lichtenstein, a different one, that talks about the matter, about the fact that we know, and this we know already from most Rishonim and Poskim, that as opposed to other mitzvos, where the rule, ha'osek b'mitzvah, patur min mitzvah, one who's busy now doing one mitzvah, is exempt from doing another mitzvah that comes to his front. Regarding Torah learning, even though Torah learning is in some aspect the most important mitzvah, however, it says clearly that if what comes to your front while you're learning Torah is a mitzvah that cannot be done by others, you need to close the book and do that mitzvah. And Rav Lichtenstein explained, as opposed to the Meiri just thought that the rule ha'osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah doesn't apply to Torah learning. Rav Lichtenstein says no, based on the Rambam, by the way, that it doesn't apply. In principle, one who's learning Torah, it's no worse mitzvah than any other mitzvah. Therefore, he's really, in principle, exempt from doing another mitzvah. However, if the mitzvah that came to his front is a mitzvah that cannot be done by others, well, that puts a big question mark whether he's now busy learning Torah. Okay? If you learn Torah and you don't close the book and do a mitzvah that cannot be done by others, then I don't know what you're learning, but it's maybe an intellectual enterprise, whatever. But Torah, an essential component of the definition of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, is lilmod al menat la'asot. And if a mitzvah that cannot be done by others, you're ignoring it, then it puts a big question mark whether your limud Torah is a limud al menat la'asot in order to do, and therefore that's the reason you need to close the book and do the mitzvah. This is a review of last week. We're now going to next week, okay? Now, to this week. Now, I just want to say that last comment about this is that as an answer to a question that was asked 2 weeks ago, whether we don't see the Torah learning as an iron dome, okay? And I want to and I answered, but I'll repeat the answer that I gave. Let's say Rav Lando, that I quote started the shir today with, that from yesterday night. Yeah, it's really recent, less than 24 hours. He said, A, don't cooperate. Yeah, he instructed the yeshiva bochers not to cooperate with the authorities at all. And he also said a country, no, we need to hear what he says. A country that is dismissing, that is violating, is harming the Torah learning, okay, it's like a suicidal act. It loses its ability to exist, okay? And by the way, I trust him that he believes what he's saying, okay? But here, wait a minute. I trust him that he believes what he's saying. But here's what I answered to that claim that came up 2 weeks ago. What I answered is the following. Simply put, even if I assume that Torah learning is defending, mystically helping the soldiers in the war. By the way, even if I just want to say here, a general comment. If I don't believe in this mystic defending of Torah learning, the soldiers, whatever, I could still make a valid, rational claim that Am Yisrael and the Jewish state has to preserve Torah learning as a main component of Jewish identity for generations. Okay, that's for sure. Meaning, we can't afford destroying Torah learning as a state. That's for sure. Even if we don't believe in that mystical thing. B, let's say I do believe in that mystical belief that Torah learning is a Segula, defense, the soldier, etc. Even that. So I said, all right. I mentioned my beloved son who was learning serious Torah in Gaza and others. Meaning, you don't have not to serve in the army in order to keep the Torah in Am Yisrael and to have that Segula. Soldiers are learning. People that are not able to participate in the combat units are also learning. People in the regular days when there is no war, just the ordinary, let's call it between the wars. So the Hesder Yeshivot program is that there is a rotation when 1 year is serving in the army, the other year is in the yeshiva. So a claim that in order to keep the Torah in Am Yisrael, the yeshiva bachors don't have to serve in the army, this claim doesn't hold water. Okay? So now, after these introductory comments, we need to go to the last source, the very last source in the first page. The very last source in the first page. We started it intentionally, the end of last week's class. Therefore, I won't repeat what we read already. I'll just repeat it orally. The Gemara, that's, by the way, just 1 second. There's a problem if I don't drink it soon, then it becomes an iced coffee. But you know what? Maybe, why not? It's such a hot day.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
In Jewish history, religious history, was there ever a case where people refused to serve in the army?
So the answer is twofolded, but I don't want to elaborate on it. A, and actually we did relate to it 2 weeks ago indirectly. Unfortunately, in most of Jewish history, we didn't have a state and we didn't have an army. So there's not a lot of precedences. That's part of the problem. Part of the problem is that, say, the Shulchan Aruch and all the extensive halachic writings do not deal with the area, with the case of a sovereign Jewish state and army. Okay? That's why I went to the Rambam, not to the Shulchan Aruch, because the Rambam deals with everything. That's okay. So that's point one. Point two, as we learned last week from Ramban, that's in the middle of the first page. We read it 2 weeks ago. We've seen that Tachlis, when there was a sovereign, there was an army. Avraham Avinu was a commander. David HaMelech was a commander. Meaning that's none of them said since I'm a Torah learner, we're exempt. But no, I want to. Okay, just say what you want.
Isn't a better answer that your son learning in Gaza, etc.? Isn't a better answer not 62,000?
So that's why I said I don't want to go even into. But but you're right. But I want to say no. But I'm saying a stronger claim. A, there are several layers to the claim. Okay. A, no way 62,000. 1 second. B, and that's one of my battles here. Not only that there's no justification for 62,000, but even more, the assumption that in order to keep the Torah, I need that Ilui not to serve in the army. If he will serve in the army, his Torah will be destroyed. I deny it. I mentioned it 2 weeks ago. Rav Re'ema Kohen, Rosh Yeshiva of Otniel, an officer. Rav Yuval Sherlo, Rosh Yeshiva of Tel Aviv, an officer. Rav Meir Kahana, candidate to the chief rabbinate, an officer in Sanchanim. I served with him. Okay, so I refuse to accept the hidden assumption that in order to keep that Shmuat Teva, how do you call it? What?
Nature reserve.
And this nature reserve of Torah.
Can't go to the army.
You can't go to the army. I just refuse to accept that. You know, they brush their teeth in the morning. They eat breakfast. Okay, they do a lot of it. They hear the shofar. They do a lot of things. Okay? So now I want to go to, what I want to review, and Bemet, let's focus on this because we have a lot to cover. To review the sources that are brought by some rabbis, leaders, to kiviyachol, supposedly proof that Torah learners are exempt from the army. Again, they'll still have to answer why the Rambam omitted it in the places that it was appropriate to mention it. But okay, let's say they're bringing up proofs. Let's review them. So, and we'll review here. There's several things, but we'll review two main ones. Okay. So the first one is the only halachic source that they're bringing. That's already a weakness. All of their proofs, all the rest of their proofs are from Aggadic literature, which is very problematic in terms of halachic discussion. But let's review the only halachic source that is brought. So we started learning it 2 weeks ago, and I'll review what we learned. What we learned was a certain Mishnah and then Gemara in Bava Batra that is Bechlal, doesn't deal with mitzvos. That's not the topic there, but rather with the laws of neighbors. Hilchot Shchenim. Yeah, like the laws of neighbors, meaning when neighbors collect, when a municipality or the head of a community are collecting things, who is obligated to pay for these services? Okay, so and that was the topic, and the discussion was about a city that has a wall and has a gate. Who is required? Who of the residents is required to participate in the payment, and that the heads of the community can coerce him to pay? Okay, so they discussed you should live in a place at least 12 months in order to be obligated. But if you bought a place there, you came to live and you bought a property there and you're living at your home, then even from day one, you have to pay. And that's very clear because you are having benefits from that expense, meaning you're having, the wall serves you, the wall protects you, the gate protects you, therefore you have to pay for it just like others. And there's a whole discussion. What is the criteria? Should everyone pay the same? Or maybe people that are living closer to the border, they should pay more because they benefit from it more, all kinds of things. And we had a discussion. Okay, and then it said there, the statement, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehuda, Reish Lakish, and Rabbi Yochanan made a claim, and the claim was the following: that you should not collect from Talmidei Chachamim, Torah learners. Why? And that's the term that is very famous, that became famous. Rabbanan lo tzrichei netiruta. The rabbis, literally I'm translating, the rabbi don't need a shmira because the Torah protects them. Okay, so now what was the logic? The logic was, here, you see, in a halachic context, you see that the claim is that the rabbis don't need protection, and therefore they're exempt from paying that tax. Consequently, if we apply it, copy-paste, if we apply it to our sugya, they should stay in their yeshivot and not come to serve in the army, because they don't need the protection. The Torah protects them. So wait a minute. Before we start analyzing this line of logic, okay, from the Gemara. Not clear whether this Gemara talks about protection in terms of life-threatening threats, perhaps the wall there and the gate is to defend from robbers, stealers, not necessarily issues that have to do with risks of life. But this is not clear. So just for the sake of discussion, let's assume that indeed the statement in the Gemara there is the rabbis don't need protection even from life-threatening things. Yeah, meaning they're not benefiting from the wall because the Torah is their wall. So they're not benefiting from their wall, from the wall, and therefore they're exempt from paying. So now let's analyze the analogy to exemption, supposedly being exempt from army service.
Yes, so let us accept what you just said, because they're learning and they don't need protection. That is completely different from the fact that your neighbors on Yisrael are in danger and they do need protection.
Right.
And your obligation is not just to protect yourself, but
Yeah. So I would just want to echo the claim. Wait a minute. What was said? What's your name again? I'm sorry. I apologize. What? Fagi. So what Fagi, Mrs. Kaplan said, that is the main claim. There are others too. Why this is an erroneous proof. It's an absurd proof from that source. That Gemara does not discuss mitzvot at all, obligations at all. That Gemara discusses just, okay, if there is a if there is a TV antenna in the house, so one that doesn't have TV could claim that I shouldn't participate in the expenses of funding that TV antenna. This is what that Gemara deals with. It totally does not talk about a Torah obligation to risk yourself in order not to protect yourself too, but mainly to protect others. Let's remind what's the definition of our milchemet mitzvah. It's written in the Rambam. The milchama is, let's repeat what's written in Hilchos Melachim, le'ezrat Yisrael miyad tsar sheba alehem. Translation, to help rescue the people of Israel from an enemy that is coming to destroy them. Meaning, I am obligated to draft in order to protect others, to protect Am Yisrael. So the fact that, let's say even that this Gemara implies, which is highly a doubt, but let's say that this Gemara implies that I, as a Torah learner, a dedicated Torah learner, I have a wall. The Torah protects me. No harm will reach me. If the Nukhba guy will come to me, his hand will get frozen because the Torah protects me. Let's assume that's assumption. So you don't need the protection. You, the yeshiva bachur, you don't need the protection. Okay, but your neighbor does need the protection. And since he needs the protection, you have an obligation. Okay, I'll say even more. The case that the Gemara deals with. Let's say in all the city, hypothetically, the Gemara didn't discuss such a case. Everyone is very poor, and they can't fund the wall. And Dafka, the Talmud Chacham, is a very wealthy person. So he has an obligation not out of Hilchos Shchenim, because he doesn't need protection, he's a Torah learner, but he has an obligation of Chesed to defend his neighbors. Simple. The Gemara just didn't discuss that matter. Okay? So this whole line of proof is absurd, and I'm ignoring even, you could read between the lines, the assumption to take these words literally. Rabbanan lo tzrichi netiruta. As Rav Zevin wrote in 48 to the Rashi Yeshivot in his very emotional and strong letter, criticizing them for not participating with the army, criticizing them for doing what Rav Lando now instructed, and he said, Rabbanan lo tzrichi netiruta? Rabbis don't need guarding? Really? Is that so? in Hebron in 1929, they didn't need protection. The Torah caused the Arabs there that their hands will be frozen. And Rav Lichtenstein here says a community that was considering seriously in 1967 to leave the country or to move from Sderot. We know some Haredi yeshivot, not now, in past, moved temporarily to and I'm not criticizing them necessarily for that, but then you will say I don't serve in the army because I have the Torah protects me. But I say even if I assume the Torah protects them totally, mystically, whatever, but it doesn't protect other people from Am Yisrael, and that's the end of the discussion. Now I want you guys that please flip to the second page. Yeah, just flip the page. And I don't know if that's the term. Flip the page. How do you say
Turn
that?
or flip?
Turn. Oh, flip is okay. Okay, I'm an Israeli. I don't have confidence. So let's see. Yeah.
I thought that it is an obligation to protect you, because they say the Torah is not just going to protect me, it's going to protect our whole community.
Sure.
And that's the way they express it.
Well, the Torah protects all the community. Okay. But first of all, wait a minute. First of all, the Gemara didn't say that. The Gemara says the rabbi don't need protection. The Gemara, wait 1 second. Wait 1 second. If you bring a proof from this source, so this source makes Dafka explicitly a distinction. Jews that are not Torah learners, they need to pay the tax for the wall. They don't say, no, the Torah of my neighbor protects me and therefore I don't have to pay the tax. Let's now just be without a wall. Meaning they don't argue, they accept that there should be an army. Okay? They're not saying because we're learning Torah and it protects everybody, so let's close the army. I didn't hear them saying that. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's read. Yeah.
Where is the historical reality of what happened in World War II for the Jews in Europe? Many of them were
Obviously.
Didn't have an army.
So let's look, Rav Lichtenstein. One may state, we're reading Rav Lichtenstein, one may state, you're right, and all of these claims are made up. One may state in reply that this claim raises a very serious moral issue. What you said is absolutely right. One may state in reply that this claim raises a very serious moral issue. You see that? It's the second page, pretty much on the top of it. Can anyone whose life is not otherwise patterned after this degree of trust and bitachon argue for exemption on this ground? Rabbanan lo tzrichin et teruta, rabbis don't. Is it possible to worry about one's economic future in evident disregard of Rabbi Eliezer's statement that whoever has bread in his basket and says, what shall I eat tomorrow, is but of little faith, and still not enter the army because one is presumably safe without it? The payment in question, now he talks about the Gemara, the payment in question is not inherently normative. It relates to no mitzvah whatsoever. Rabbi Lichtenstein here is pretty much saying what we said orally, so it relates to no mitzvah whatsoever. Rather, it derives solely from the obligation to help defray the cost of communal facilities from which one reaps benefit. Reaps? How do you... Okay. This is obvious from the context. The imposed is discussed in the same Mishnah that deals with requiring tenants of a courtyard to pay for a gate to a watchman's booth, or both, in order to keep out trespassers and onlookers, and both are cited in the Rambam and Hilchot Shchenim, the laws of neighbors. Moreover, it is reflected in the fact that the sum is prorated according to the degree of benefit involved, with those subject to the greatest risk paying the most. Hence, those who derive no direct benefit pay nothing. Tenants without cars do not generally pay for the upkeep of a building's garage. And those who have no television sets may be exempt from sharing in the cost of a central antenna. This situation, you see the bold letters? We reach the bold letters in the beginning of the next paragraph. This situation, those who don't have pages, I'm sorry, but you could hear what I'm reading, and if it's too fast, please tell me. This situation is radically different, however, says Rav Lichtenstein, with respect to an obligation precisely rooted in the responsibility to help others qua others. Exactly what you said, Figi. Does anyone suppose that one's duty to engage in a defensive milchemet mitzvah, and again he quotes the Rambam, to help save the people of Israel from a foe who has descended upon them, is based solely upon the fact that one is presently or potentially in danger, meaning he is going to the army only to protect himself? In the context of egocentric ethic of Mandeville or an Adam Smith, possibly. From a Torah perspective, however, this would be a strange doctrine, the more so to the extent that we correctly perceive that such action is mandated by the general norm of Gmilut Chasadim, as Rav Lichtenstein claimed, that it's not only Milchemet Mitzvah, it's also the utmost level of Gmilut Chasadim, and not just the specific command of defensive war. Now again, bold letters. I made the bold letters, okay? It's not in. Consequently, it's not in the. It's not in the source. Yeah, the emphasis are mine. Consequently, the Gemara in Bava Batra provides no rationale whatsoever for totally exempting Talmidei Chachamim from military service. They may not require protection, but others do, and their duty to defend those who have no built-in armor remains. All right, so that's a very clear point, and that's aside from the point that, as was mentioned here justifiably, excuse me, what's your name? Naftali. By Naftali, that the idea that if you learn Torah, then a terrorist or a Nazi or whatever, when he comes to shoot you, somehow the bullet freezes in the just doesn't hold water. Okay, but that's another line of claim. All right, let's see. Yes, Phil. Okay, and please.
I find a disagreeable thing in the whole study, because what I hear, and not you, chas v'shalom, I'm saying it's linguistic finagling.
Okay.
Isn't it linguistic finagling?
Look, I think.
But it's a different age. Let's say we had nothing, as you have pointed out, historically, we didn't have armored cars, we didn't have drones or anything else. So maybe in a nice little town, if there's bullies in towns, the whole yeshiva shouldn't turn out. They're tough guys, of course. But to try to take a page from the Gemara and turn it into a principle.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
And again, Phil, the Rambam didn't think that way. No one thought that way. But now I want to, with your permission, because I see we have the time, if we'll use it in an efficient way. There is another, so we dealt with this source, okay? Now there is another source that is widely quoted to supposedly justify the exemption of yeshiva bachors from army service. It was quoted, it was mentioned by, actually maybe in the popular rhetoric, it's even more common than the previous one. For example, Rav Yitzchak Yosef, when he had his famous Motzi Shabbos speech about leaving the country, if it will be forced. Yeah. So Rav Yitzchak Yosef, the former chief rabbi, we can say now, 1 second, the former, no, I had a better deal. But I'll tell you, that I'll tell after this year, okay? I don't want it to be recorded. I had a better deal. At any rate, when Rav Yitzchak Yosef, in his famous, if we'll be forced to go to the army, we'll leave the country. So his claim there, again, he said, we are Shevet Levi. Shevet Levi, the Rambam says, are exempt from serving in the army. Meaning, that's a very popular claim in the rhetoric. 1 second. The day afterwards, I heard an interview by 2 Haredi journalists in the radio that interviewed Chaver HaKnesset Simcha Rotman, who was arguing with, it was a very respectful discussion, but they said like, Shevet Levi, that was very clear. It was interesting to hear it from 2 Haredi journalists, but okay, Shevet Levi, meaning, the claim is, Rabbi Kannai, you said that the Rambam in Hilchot Malachim and Hilchot Talmud Torah doesn't mention any exemption, but you need to learn the entire Rambam. For some strange reason, the Rambam at the end of Sefer Zraim, at the end of Hilchot Shemitah veYovel, the laws of Shemitah and Yovel, wrote explicitly that Torah learners are exempt from serving in the army. So now let's look at that supposed proof, and we'll see. Again, I'm sorry I'm doing the spoiler, that it doesn't hold water. It's even weaker than the previous source, and the previous source was very weak, as you've seen. But let's read now seriously the Rambam in Hilchot Shemitah veYovel. This time it's in Hebrew, okay? We'll translate it, and then we'll have Rav Lichtenstein and others' comments. Okay. Velama, we are in page 3 of the source sheets, okay? I'll read it loud, okay? Velama לא זכה לוי בנחלת ארץ ישראל ובביזתה עם אחד. Okay, I just want to say one thing before, because the context here is very important. And everyone knows that Rav Landau knows that. That's how he teaches his student. When you learn seriously a Rambam, the Rambam was a master of order, and it's very, very important to pay attention to the context. Okay? All right? So let's explain what's going on here. The Rambam wrote the book Hayad HaChazakah. Yeah, Mishnah Torah. Yad is 14. Yad. Yud, Daled. 14 volumes. Zmanim, Mada. These are like big volumes. So the book, the code book, is composed of 14 volumes. One of the volumes is Zraim. That deals with Orla, Shemitah, Maasros, all the things that have to do with agriculture. Now, many, many times the Rambam in his code book chooses to end a volume. I didn't check it always, but many times he ends a volume with some spiritual, elevating, agadic, in order to inspire you. Yeah, he ends the volume with some inspirational, uplifting remarks. We're now reading the end of a volume. The end of Hilchot Shemitah veYovel, the laws of Shemitah and Yovel, is the end of the whole volume of Zraim. So now, after we explain the location of what we're reading, let's start reading it again. It's the two last halachot in the volume. Yud Bet, Perk Yud Gimel, Yud Bet, Yud Gimel. Velama lo zacha levi. He mentioned, Yovel has to do with nachalot, with how we say nachalot? The division of the country, each tribe has this portion, and we know that Levi, the Levites, have nothing, right? Why? God is there. God is there. The term in the Torah, last week we read it in Korach, God is their portion. Okay? So, now he explains that. And why didn't Levi get any portion in the land of Israel? And with the booty, how do you say it? The visa? When in the war, when you get spoil, in the spoil of the with his brothers. Why he is out of this? He is the only tribe that is singled out and doesn't get that. Mipnei shuvda la'avod Hashem lesharto, because he was distinguished to serve God, to work and serve God. Leorot rachav hayesharim. No, la'avod et Hashem. It says to service God and to be the teachers, to teach his straight ways and his laws and his righteous laws to all the public. As it says, Shene'emar, Yoru mishpatecha leYaakov v'toratcha leYisrael. That's what Moshe says to Levi before he dies. Your role is to be Torah teachers. Lefichach, therefore, huvdelu midarchei olam. So because Shevet Levi, that's his role, and he was distinguished from all the rest of the tribes for that, dedicated to that, therefore they were differentiated from all the ordinary, mundane ways of the world. לא עורכים מלחמה כשאר ישראל. That's the main sentence here. They're not engaged in wars like the rest of Israel. Again, I repeat the sentence. לא עורכים מלחמה. They are not engaging in wars like the rest of the people of Israel. ולא נוחלין, and they don't inherit a land. They don't have a land portion. ולא זוכין לעצמן בכוח גופם. They don't have property, generally. How do they eat? They get maasros. אלא הם חיל השם. Rather, they're the army, Chabad, צבקות השם. They're God's army. שנאמר, ברך השם חילו. They are God's army. והוא ברוך הוא, and in exchange, he blessed him, זוכה להם, he takes care of them, שנאמר, אני חלקך ונחלתך. God says, I am your portion, I am your land. ולא שבט לוי בלבד. And now, next law. So that's Shevet Levi. Now the Rambam continues, and that's the important continuation, the crescendo. ולא שבט לוי בלבד. And what I said here doesn't apply only to, what I said here is actually a comment that I added, which is questionable. So I'll be very literal here. And not only the tribe of Levi, אלא, rather, כל איש ואיש מכל באי העולם. By the way, not necessarily Jews. Any man from the world, rather, not only Shevet Levi, but any man from the world, אשר נדבה רוחו אותו, that he had inspiration, והבינו מדעו, and he comprehended, understood, להיבדל, to distinguish himself, to stand and לעמוד לפני השם לשרתו, to stand in front of God and serve him, and worship him, ולעובדו לדעה את השם, to know God, והלך ישר כמו שעשהו אלוקים, and he went straight, just as God pure, just as he came from the womb, כמו שעשהו אלוקים, ופרק מעל צווארו, look about this man that wants to be like the Levites. He פרק מעול צווארו עול החשבונות הרבים אשר ביקשו בני אדם. He is not engaged in any of the mundane issue. Parnasa, nothing. He's not worried about his bank account. He doesn't deal with everything in the material world. Such a man, says the Rambam, הרי זה נתקדש קודש קודשים. He sanctified himself and he is Kodesh. This is a holy of the holiest man. ויהיה השם חלקו, and indeed Hashem will be his portion and his nachla. לעולם ולעולמי עולמים. Eternally, forever. ויזכה לו בעולם הזה דבר המספיק לו. And indeed he will have what he needs in this world. Meaning he won't starve. כמו שזכה לכהנים ללוויים. Just like God takes care of the Kohanim Levim. הרי דוד עליו השלום אומר, this is what David says, השם מנת חלקי וחוסי, Hashem is my portion, אתה תומך גואלי. That's how the Rambam ends the volume. Very inspirational words. And now, come Rav Yitzchak Yosef. And many other Charedim. I have to say it's a pretty popular claim. Even though I think I heard that Rav Isra Zalman Meltzer, I heard that. Zecher Tzadok Levracha said that anyone who uses this Rambam, and we'll explain why, in order to justify an exemption of Torah learners from army service is a Naval Birshut Torah. And I think he's right. I'm sure soon you'll see why. I'm saying it's a popular claim, but let's first explain the claim. You know, when you attack a claim, you first need to present it in a fair way. It's very important, because then, if not, you're not doing your job properly. So what Rav Yitzchak Yosef and others claim, they say, here, read the Rambam. The text is clear. Let's go step by step. Okay, I'm saying now orally. I'm reviewing the points orally that we read. He says that anyone from the tribe of Levi. First he speaks, it's step by step. Step one, let's speak about the Levites themselves. If you're a Levite, you don't have property, you don't have a land, and you don't engage in wars like the rest of the people of Israel. That's the exact quote. You're not engaging in wars. I'll finish and then You don't engage in wars like the rest of the people of Israel. So that's what the Rambam says about the Levites. Then the Rambam goes to step 2 and said, not only the Levites, anyone who decides, I want to sanctify myself and not deal with any of the material matters in the world, God will be his portion. I said, that's the text. Comes Rav Yitzchak Yosef and says, aha, so if it was said regarding the Levites that they're not engaging in wars just like the rest of Israel, so also that person who volunteered, who decided to be a Levite, so he also, that applies to him also, that he's not engaged in wars like the rest of the people of Israel. So the Torah learners, the Yeshiva Boys, they are the Levites, okay? They don't have to be genetically Levites, as we've seen in Maimonides explicitly. And therefore, since regarding the Levites it was written that they're not engaged in wars like the rest of the people of Israel, the same applies to these people. That's the claim. Now, that's the claim from the text. Still, Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef will have to give an answer, even if he is right, and he's not. But let's assume that he reads the Rambam properly. It's very strange why the Rambam mentions it here in a very, very indirect way, and doesn't mention in Hilchos Talmud Torah. When he gives a list of all the benefits of Torah learners, he should have mentioned that in a very clear halachic context. That's already raises a big question mark. But as we'll see, I think it's not written in the text. Yeah, I explained how he reads the text. It's not. I will claim here that it's not written in the text at all. Okay? And I'm first opening the discussion for the people to, again, yeah.
Actually, the two, Levium versus the Talmud Chacham, are diametrically opposite. The Levium are exempt because it's a trade-off. In other words, they're working in the Beit HaMikdash, etc., therefore they don't go to the army. The second one is, this is a person who's not of this world. And let me tell you, you look at Yosef's threads, those are of this world and not of the other world. In other words, if you meet every one of the Rambam's qualifications, therefore you can be exempt. But there's nobody who meets those qualifications.
Right. So first of all, as Rav Lichtenstein will articulate the same claim that you're saying, it's very hard to find a person with a minimum of dignity and self-pride and intellectual honesty that will say that he doesn't care at all about what he eats, about because this is the person that is, but there's even a stronger claim going. Did someone want to say something or?
Well, first of all,
very good. Okay, excuse me. One second. All right. Sure. Yeah. I'll return to what you said now.
First of all, also the question is if Shedet Levi is patur min milchemet mitzvah.
Sure. So look, it's like 1 second. Excuse me. It's like we have a term in Hebrew. Lichtov Noach b'sheva shgiot. It's as if you're writing the word Noach with 7 mistakes. Meaning, there's so many bugs here in that reading that you don't know even how to start. But I'll mention two very serious bugs that were mentioned here. Okay, if you'll let me. Aside from the first comment, which is totally valid. Look, this criteria that the Rambam brings, someone that was sanctified Kodesh Kodashim and doesn't care at all about his property and anything. Excuse me, and we're not accusing anyone, but people are not living according to that standard. But 2 claims that were mentioned here. The Rambam says about the Levites, that they don't have a nachala. A land. Did you see that Rav Yitzchak Yosef said that all the Torah learners they cannot buy property here. They can't write their land in the tabu when they went. Did you see that? Is that the general? Did Rav Landoi instruct now all of his yeshiva buffers never to write their land in the tabu, not to buy bechlal properties? We know that in Shidduchim the discourse is slightly different. So about taking care that I'll have a dira, taking care that I'll have a dira, etc. Yeah, so if you can't take one sentence, or they're not engaging in war like the rest of the people of Israel, but ignore the other sentence that says that they have no nachala. We never saw a law that Torah learners are not entitled to have a property. Okay, claim 1, claim 2 that was mentioned here, and it's totally true. The precise term the Rambam used is lo orchin milchama. I was very careful. Kishar Yisrael. They're not engaged in war in the same manner that the rest of the people of Israel. That doesn't say that they totally are not engaged in war. That it just said that it's different. Maybe they're exempt from Milchemet Rashut, but from Milchemet Mitzvah, we've seen even a groom from his room and a bride from her chuppah. Furthermore, the Gemaras prove that, because the Gemara in Sanhedrin discusses Eishet Yefat Toar, in Parshat Ki Tetzeh, of a Kohen. What is the Kohen doing in the army? He's Shevet Levi. He's exempt. Okay, so you see, it doesn't hold water. Fourth claim, and that may be the answer to some of the things that we are. The only analogy that the Rambam does, it actually covers what I said, is that just like the Levite could distinguish himself and elevate himself to worship God, any other man can do that. But he didn't make the analogy regarding all the laws that are written regarding the Levi specifically. He clearly does not mention that. Okay? So, and indeed, we know that Torah learners have portions, etc. So, one cannot use this source, again, this uplifting spiritual source, to halacha l'maisa. Last point here, look at the Rambam Hilchos Talmud Torah. You see that's the next line. The Rambam's Shita, just for being intellectually honest, the Shulchan Aruch disagrees with him, and most poskim disagree with him, but the Rambam himself, we're talking now Rambam, has a very strong position that says the following. Kol hamasim alibo, in the Hilchos Talmud Torah, anyone who thinks that he should sheyasok b'Torah, that he will learn Torah, v'lo yaseh melacha, and he won't work for parnasa, and his parnasa will be from charity, i.e. kolel, okay? Harei ze chilel et Hashem. The Rambam is very strong. He disgraced, right, that's the word, disgraced the name of God. And he biza et Torah, and he disgraced the Torah. V'chiba me'or hadat, and he extinguished the light of the religion. V'garam ra'a le'atzmo, and he caused badness to himself. V'natal chayav min ha'olam haba, and he doesn't have olam haba. So again, the Rambam is extreme. Not all the rabbis agreed with this position, but at least if you speak Rambam, how can you reconcile a claim that says that Torah learners should not deal with any material things, God is their portion, they're not engaged in any material life, right? You have to explain then why the Rambam insists that every Torah learner will be busy in working and earning his own money. I think that already puts everything in the right perspective, and now you all understand that that to use this Rambam, as Rav Yitzchak Yosef did, is abusing really the source. Now let's read a Rav Lichtenstein, just that we won't leave anything empty. Rav Lichtenstein says, first, the initial postulate that every Levite enjoys a dispensation from army duty, dispensation from army duty, thank you, has no source in Chazal. On the contrary, it contravenes the evident purport of the Mishnah in Sota that says that everyone goes to a Milchemet Mitzvah. But in case of wars of Mitzvah, all go out, even a groom from his wedding groom and a bride from her wedding chamber. As has often been noted, if the Rambam's formulation is understood as a total bar on army service by Shevet Levi, it seems to be clearly contradicted by a Gemara in Kiddushin. Would or should Bnei Torah readily, that's the Gemara that I mentioned to you about an Eshet Yafat Torah of a Kohen. Would or should Bnei Torah readily lean upon such a thin reed in order to exempt themselves from, say, the mitzvah of lulav or shofar? Did you see any Ben Torah saying, no, I'm not stopping my learning for hearing shofar. I'm Shevet Levi. Second, it seems most unlikely that this statement is indeed all it is presumed to be. If the Rambam had truly intended to postulate a categorical dispensation for Bnei Levi or Bnei Torah, would he have presented and formulated in this manner in context? Giving his sharply honed discipline and sense of order, would he not have cited it in Hilchot Malachim Umilchamoteihem and wars to cite the full rubric together with all the laws of warfare, rather than as a peroration to Sefer Zerayim? The implication is clear. What we have here is hortatory coda. Yeah, I know it. He did his PhD on Milton. Yeah. What we have here is a hortatory coda, analogous to the conclusions of many of the books of Mishnah Torah, which is, of course, is to be given full weight as such, since it is, after all, the Rambam's, but is not to be confused with the clear halachic mandate. It provides a vivid evaluation of an inspiring personality, but does not dictate how it or others should act. Turn the page, please. Flip the page. Turn the page. In a spiritual order, is a spiritual order excused from saving human lives? To the extent that this obligation is rooted in the overall norm of Milut Chasadim, it encompasses everyone. The world of a Ben Torah, too, rests upon three pillars: Torah, Avoda, and Gemilut Chasadim, and the balance between them. Of course, no one would suggest that all Bnei Yeshiva stop learning and turn to cardiology. There is, however, a clear difference between abstaining from specializing in a humanitarian endeavors and foregoing a universal effort. And above all, the issue is not one of suspending Talmud Torah, God forbid, but of balancing and complementing it. To stand before God, to serve Him, to worship Him, to know God, and he walks aright as the Lord has made him, and he has cast off from his neck the yoke of the many considerations that men have sought. To how large a segment of the Torah community or a fortiori of any community does this lofty typology apply? 2%? 5%? Can anyone who has negotiated the terms of a salary, perhaps even of Nadan or Kest, or both, look into a mirror and tell himself that he need not go to the army because he's Kodesh Kodashim, Sanctum Sanctorum, in the Rambam's terms? Can anyone with even a touch of vanity or concern for kavod, self-kavod, contend this? Okay, I think it's very, very clear. All right, I think it's time, 10:15, because we're ending this topic next week. I think I'm teaching here next week. I believe. So next week we'll deal with, believe it or not, another topic that is very relevant. Deals with regarding hostage, meaning releasing hostages, etc. But now let's conclude. I'll take 1 minute. Let's conclude with the last paragraph in that page, in that very page that we read, Rav Zevin's public letter in 1948. Aval matzinu dvarim meforashim lehefech. Yeah, he rebukes the Rashi Yeshivot for not participating with the army, cooperating with the army. We found explicit things that are contrary. God's angel rebuked Yehoshua. Why aren't you learning now at night? And he says that's clear. When you're fighting in the day, it's justified that you're not learning. And he says that he quotes the Arch that we said. And as I told you, Rav Zevin also mentioned the fact that one cannot use the term the rabbis don't need shmira after what we have seen historically. There is a source here that we didn't cover, and it's okay, of Rav Melamed. Rav Melamed basically agrees with Rav Lichtenstein that there is no exemption, but he, and again, he's not talking about wartime, he's talking generally, a country should make for its national identity and security cheshbonos, and might decide that there is a group of people that are dedicated to Talmud Torah, like sportsmen. Now, regarding that, I said, I have a certain resistance, which is that there is like an underlying assumption that in order to save the Torah and Am Yisrael, I need that group that will not serve in the army. I don't accept it. Though again, if it will be in the right number, just like there's some sportsmen that are exempt. How many sportsmen are exempt a year? 10? I don't know what. So if it will be in a let's say, I'll say it this way. Let's say there is an Ilui, a tremendous Yeshiva Bachor, that is also not able to fight. Okay? All right? So I can hear that maybe you say, okay, will he serve in intelligence now? Or will he learn now 3 years? Torah? Okay, we can discuss that. Okay? But we're not in that ball game at all now. Beseder, toda rabah. Anyone wants to ask me something is welcome. I just don't want to keep the people.
Can I ask you a question?
I was late, but you were wonderful. And can I get this?
Sure.
Thank you.
But secondly,